Hello and welcome back to the Everyday Joy podcast. I'm your host, Ash Owen, and I cannot wait to find moments of joy with you today. Over on the Apple podcast review section, we have a beautiful review from someone called Bianca Jade. They say, I'm a big fan of the Everyday Joy podcast. It has become a part of my morning routine and is such a wholesome, thoughtful, and positive way to set me up for the day. Thank you to the whole team and all the guests that pop onto the airways to spread your wise words, wisdom, and encouragement. Thank you so much for your incredible feedback. Honestly, this is everything that I would love this podcast to do if you're listening. I would love for it to become a part of your daily routine. I hope that it pours wisdom and joy into your life. And, you know, if you love the Everyday Joy podcast, whether you've been listening for a long time or maybe today's your first ever time listening, why don't you jump over onto Apple Podcasts or over onto Spotify and write us a written review, just like what Bianca did. It means more people can find out about us and more people get to discover a little bit of everyday joy. I cannot wait for you to hear today's conversation, so why don't you get ready to dive into today's words to live by.
Jesus said, self-help is no help at all. Self-sacrifice is the way to finding yourself, your true self. You can find that in Matthew 16, verse 25 in the Message version.
Tilly, hello. It is so good to have you here. I love hanging out with you. You're just such a fashionista.
You said that last time.
I know, but every time I see you, I'm like, I love her outfits.
It's definitely been repeated a few times.
That's fine, but I love it. Well, today we're looking at Matthew 16, verse 25. It's a bit of an interesting one.
Yeah.
In this version, it says, Jesus said, self-help is no help at all. Self-sacrifice is the way of finding yourself, your true self. We live in a world that is so focused on self that like selflessness is what's the word?
It's rare.
It's the rarity. It's the you do that every now and again when you feel like helping someone out.
And it's hard.
Totally. It's not built into us to be selfless. We are so, even unintentionally, we are so selfish in the way that we act, the way we live, the way we do things. Everything, I feel like, is set up in a way where you go, okay, I'm going to preserve myself. I'm going to preserve my time, my energy. Everything is based around us.
Yeah.
And I think it's toxic.
Well, I mean, think about the whole Apple legacy, like iPod, iPhone, I like whatever. It's a lot. iPad, like everything is I.
Yeah, it's true. And I don't know. I just think that when I look at this, and I've shared this before in a podcast episode, the times where I have been less focused on myself and doing things for other people are the times where I felt the most fulfilled ever. Yes, there's moments where it's tiring. Yes, there's moments where, you know, it's not easy. But I could only stay at home and do self-care, self-help for so long.
Yes.
Like there will get to a point where that doesn't help you.
And there's so many books on self-help right now as well. Totally. But it only gets so far, especially because there's no Jesus.
Yeah. And I think that's what this verse is saying. And in a second, I'll get you to read out the other version. It's like we have this expectation, I suppose, and this mentality in our current day that the harder we work on ourselves, the better life will get.
Absolutely.
But that is counter gospel.
Yes.
The gospel is we can't do it on our own. We can't be self-satisfied. We need Jesus. Like that is the only way we will find true satisfaction. So it is challenging because it is so countercultural.
And that's the thing. So the other versions do literally say, for whoever will save his life shall lose it, and whoever will lose his life for my sake, so Jesus, will find it. And, you know, like just before this verse, in 24, it says, if anyone wants to follow me, you must turn from your ways, take up the cross and follow me. So it has been, it's two parts. It's taking up your cross and then also realizing that self-help, it has an end point. Like there is no long-term satisfaction or life that comes from it. And the whole timing of these verses is just after Jesus has revealed the full extent of his mission on earth, like why he's here. And it's to suffer in death, but then rise again on the third day and like it just shows that there is life. The whole point is saying that there's life after the cross, but it's a paradox. Like how do we have life in full when we're denying ourselves and taking up the cross daily? But that is literally what Jesus is saying, because he's like, but for my sake, like instead of your own desires, you pick up my desires. Instead of living for your own instant gratification and self-love and self-pampering and just making everything about yourself, like that in the end will destroy you. It's not satisfying.
Yeah.
But Jesus says, come for life and life in the full.
Totally. And that's not to say don't look after yourself. That's not to say burn yourself out. But what it's saying is, in the moments of life where it's like, am I going to sacrifice for others, for the Lord, versus benefit me?
Yes.
It's a good crossroads of going, okay, this is how I'm going to make my decisions. This is how I'm going to do it all. And yeah, I don't know, I guess it just shows me that God knows that we're going to be selfish, and he knows that.
It's a hard verse.
Oh, it's
a very hard verse.
And look, I'm not going to lie. I know that I'm like that sometimes. I know that I live like that. And it reminds me of, in not last week, the week before, I had a really good chat with Lucy about body image and what it looks like to trust in God over how he's created you to be. It's a great episode. Go listen to it if you haven't listened to it already. But when I hear this verse, it reminds me of what really helped me overcome the worst part of my journey of insecurity and struggling around body image. And, it's not an exact parallel to this verse, but it was a moment where I had to learn how to disregard what the world told me would fix my insecurities and accept what Christ says would fix my insecurities. And when I say fix, I still deal with it sometimes. I still have moments where it's tough. But doing these things has made it so much easier. So when I was going through the peak of my struggles, when it was really bad, like it was an everyday thing. It was, I'd be getting ready for work and the thoughts in my mind about my appearance were so bad. Like things that the world tell you will fix your insecurity is to pamper yourself, to change yourself, to better yourself. Sometimes it's just to focus so much on the things you're insecure about that you learn to love them, to focus so much on yourself. I found being so self-centered, so self-obsessed almost in this journey to love myself. I became so selfish and so self-obsessed, and not in a good way, because I was so self-obsessed with my appearance, but I still didn't like who I was. I still didn't like my appearance, but I would put so much effort into it. I would put so much time into it and still come out of it not loving that God had created me to be just the way I am. For me, self-help was no help at all. Self-help made me more insecure. Self-help led me to comparing myself even greater. You know what made me better? It wasn't self-help. It was learning to love, 1, who God is more, 2, who God created me to be, and 3, focusing less actually on myself.
Yes.
It made it so much more about going, okay, God, I feel insecure today, but go, actually, what are your plans for me today?
Yes.
Not, I think I prayed a lot of prayers being like, Lord, help me to like love my appearance, help me to love my, whatever, which helps. I'm not saying they're not good things, but for me, when you still wake up the next day and feel insecure, it doesn't, you need something that's greater than that. And for me, that was actually going, Jesus, you're greater than this. Your plans for me are bigger than my appearance. Your thoughts for me are higher than my thoughts. Like, it was actually going, okay, I'm going to stop being selfish. I'm going to stop thinking so much about myself that is what I think is going to fix everything. and turn it to
I mean, that's what Jesus is saying. He's literally saying, like, when you follow your own desires, your own path to fix yourself, it won't work. Like, the world's way of finding happiness in general, it's empty.
Yeah.
It will not get you very far.
Yeah.
So that's why Jesus is saying, actually, picking up your cross means obeying me and picking up my desires for you rather than your own desires, because that, it hurts you in the end. Whereas Jesus, he's eternal and he's loving, and he's the one that is going to satisfy you.
Today's verse is such a great reminder that we can surrender everything to God. You know, I've seen it play out in my life, like I shared in today's episode, of how I found that self-help only led me deeper and deeper into fear and insecurity. So your action out of today's episode is a couple of things. 1, every time you have a negative thought, whether it's about body image, whether it's about your ability, what you can and can't do, it really applies to anything. I want you to counteract that with a few things. Number 1, let's focus on Thanksgiving. Let's focus on who God is and what he does. Put on a worship song. Find scriptures that talk about God's goodness. You will be astounded at how quickly your thoughts change. 2, I want you to pray and give it to God. You know, it's so easy to want to take it into our own hands. Like this verse says, self-help often doesn't. So take it out of your hands. Take the burden that you have to fix it all on your own off of your shoulders. Give it to God. And number 3, find a scripture that reminds you of who God is and who God's created you to be. There's a verse in the book of Esther, and it says, perhaps this is the moment for which you were created. This has been one of my life verses. It's been a constant reminder to me that even when I'm down, even when I was struggling with body image and mental health things, no matter what, I knew that I was created for such a time as this. I hope today's episode encourages you. Apply these things next time you're in a situation like that. And I promise you, it will just get easier and easier the more you do it. Until next time, I hope you're able to find moments of joy, and I cannot wait to chat to you tomorrow.